called angle pair. Now, what's the word pair mean? Two. You're right. You have two angles. Two angles when you have a pair of things, except for a pair of pants. A pair of pants is just one pair of pants. And I don't know why. Okay, I'll give you that. But anyway, yeah, I guess it makes sense that you have a pair of skirts. It means you have two skirts.
Huh? Say what? So like,
Pair of glasses. You have two glasses.
So like, right? See, there you go.
Or you have two legs.
Pair of legs.
Anyway, so we go back to the angle pair. This is going to deal with there's certain types of angle pair relationships, and I think two of these you guys have all seen. One of them is called complementary. I think it's T-A-R-O-I.
Yeah.
And then supplementary. We have complementary angles and supplementary angles. What comes first in the alphabet, complementary or supplementary? Complementary. What comes first in the number line, 90 or 180? 90. So the easiest thing to think of is that complementary angles are two angles whose sum, what's sum mean? Good. Two angles whose sum is 90 degrees. Really straightforward. And then supplementary angles are two angles whose sum is 180. When you have complementary and supplementary, they don't need to be next to each other. What I mean is they don't need to be adjacent. Now, adjacent angles are angles that are right next to each other. Angle 1, angle 2. Angle 1 and angle 2 are adjacent to each other because they share a side. Okay? It doesn't have to be a bicep. All I'm saying is that there's a term called adjacent angles. That's also one of the angle pair things, so I want to get into that real quick. Adjacent are angles next to each other that share a side. Remember, sides that are parts of angles are rays. So think of it this way: is that these are angles that are next to each other, that share a ray. Okay. Please stay off your phone. Thank you. Okay. Complementary and supplementary angles don't necessarily have to be adjacent to one another. I can say that angle 1 is 30 degrees. And angle 2 is 60 degrees. Oops. Zero there. What's 30 plus 60? 90. Those two angles are complementary, aren't they? They're just not next to each other, and that's okay. That's completely fine. They don't have to be adjacent. All right? You can have adjacent complementary or non-adjacent complementary. Remember, non-adjacent just means not next to. Adjacent means next to. Same thing with supplementary. Supplementary could be two angles that are next to each other that are add up to 180, or it could be two angles that are not next to each other that add up to 180. It's fairly simple. The one part of supplementary that is more specific is what we call a linear pair. Linear pair. What do you think linear means? Line. And pair would be two, and since we're talking about angles, it's nothing more than two angles that create a line. That's what linear pair would be. Linear pairs, very simple. It's two angles that create a line. Their sum is also 180 degrees. Okay. Linear pair are two angles that create a line, and their sum is still also 180 degrees. Okay. And it should work itself out fairly easy from there. Linear pair and supplementary. Linear pair is supplementary. Supplementary isn't necessarily necessarily a linear pair. Because supplementary can be angles that are not next to each other. Linear pair are always next to each other. Does that make sense? So if you see the term linear pair, we know that it's just two angles that make 180. Supplementary just means, or linear pair means they're next to, supplementary don't need to be next to each other. And that's what that looks like. Correct. They don't have to be. Okay, just like I did the example for a second with the complementary, how one was 30 here and the one in the back was 60. It's kind of the same idea, where it doesn't necessarily have to be that way as it goes through. We'll show you how this is going to work then. Let's see. Yeah, there is. What's that? Just organized.
What? How you doing?
It's just a little camera. It just thinks it's taking a picture. Now, again, I'm using one of the older text things here real fast from the older worksheet. And some of the things when things got downloaded, some of the typesetting got messed up. Remember how yesterday the degree symbols looked like exclamation points? They weren't yelling at you. They were like, "Hooray!" They weren't doing that. This measure, and you see this letter is the Greek letter for epsilon. It means angle. Okay. So if it says angles 1 and angle 2 are complementary, if angle 1 is 52, what would angle 2 have to be? How would you figure that out? Very good. It would just be 90 minus the 52, because the two angles have to add up to equal 90. We can make this more difficult if you'd like.
No, I'm okay. Just take it. You take it two, subtract that by like.
Yes, sir.
That's all I gotta do?
Yes, sir.
Everything on blue?
Yes, sir.
Look at that.
Okay. What changes if it's supplementary? What's that? Yeah. So if I change this up and I say this is supplementary, and I want to say angle 1's 76, what would I do to figure out what angle 2 would be? Yeah, I would just subtract that from 180. Now, the idea here is just keeping straight which ones mean what. And you'll hear me do this a lot. What comes first in the alphabet? Complementary corresponds with 90 degrees. Supplementary is 180. Complementary comes first, 90 comes first. Supplementary comes first, second. 180 is larger. Okay, it's kind of a cheesy way of thinking about it, but it kind of works. Yeah, it kind of works, so you don't mess it up. And also, when you think linear pair, I want you to think of the word line. Line also is one. Okay. Not terrible.
Okay.
Now, the other one, there's one other term that we're going to look at. Do me a favor. On your notes here, I want you to draw two lines. I want those two lines to intersect each other at one point. It does not matter how you draw it. I just want those two lines to intersect at one point. Okay? When you do that, How many angles are created? 4 of them. Good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to label my 4 angles, and I'm just going to start at the top and just go clockwise. Okay, and just do that. Now, in terms of what we know about our 3 vocab words right now, one of these vocab words has the relationship between angles 1 and 2. What can you say by looking at angles 1 and 2? Which one of these 3 is the vocab of it? Yes, sir. They're supplementary because they go, but more specifically, there are adjacent, but I'm looking at these 3 here. The linear pair, good. The reason that they're a linear pair is because you look at it, these 2 angles create a line, don't they? You okay with that? Which means you're right, they are supplementary, but more specifically, since they are adjacent, they are a linear pair. So I know that those 2 would have to add up to 180. What about 2 and 3? Same thing. 3 and 4? Same thing. What about 4 and 1? Same thing. Okay. Now, as you go through all of these things, excuse me, I'm going to use a real generic example. And I'm going to say that angle 1, I'm going to put a degree in here, I'm going to say it's 105 degrees. And now I'm going to back out my other angles real quick so we can see what's going on. If angle 1 is 105 degrees and it forms a linear pair with what was angle 2, how many degrees does angle 2 have to do? What would you do to figure that out? You'd subtract, and you're saying it right now. It's 75. Are we okay with that? 180 back out 105, you get 75. Now, again, going to the one below that, which was previously angle 3, 75 and this angle still create a line, which means what does that angle have to be? 105, which means going back up, what does that one left over have to be? 75. Okay. Didn't we just go all the way around all 4 angles? When you go all the way around something, how much degrees do you get? 360. Convenient, isn't it? Now, what do you notice? You're going like this and like this. The ones that are opposite each other? So there's a term for that. Everybody notice that the angles that are opposite one another, this 105 are the same? The 75 here and the 75 here is the same? No matter what you do, if you have your arms like this, the angles that are opposite each other, up and down, left and right of each other, they're always going to be the same when you have 2 lines that intersect. Because of the rules of what's called linear pairs. If you know one of them, you know all of them. Okay? So these things, this is another angle pair relationship that's called vertical angles. Vertical angles are angles that share a common vertex. The common vertex was here. Angles share common vertex. And their sides create lines. So if you look at it, if I'm coming down this way to the vertex, going up to the vertex, and then I do the other one up to the vertex in the opposite way, I'm creating a line here and a line there. Vertical angles will always be congruent. Always, always, always. That's something that we're going to be able to utilize anytime we see a diagram and we know one angle, and if we see something that is vertical, we know that the angle on the other side of it is the same. It's one of the, what we call an inference that we can make given a diagram. It's something that we'll be able to use, and we'll be able to use a lot. Vertical angles are very, very common. It's a lot of vocab so far, isn't it?
No, I'm sorry.
Well, for the most people, it's a lot of vocab. You apparently aren't like most people.
It's
Now you're going back on your word.
I'm shocking. So I see if you get the copy.
Yeah. Get too much.
Huh?
Okay, not too bad. Okay. Which means then when we get into the idea, like I was saying about these bigger picture stuff, you're asking these, I don't need all this so bad.
Oh.
When we get into stuff like this, if we, what was it? This one. Sure.
What flavor is that?
Good morning. What's this one? I thought I had the wrong one. You're in deep doo-doo. Now, oops, that didn't take.